Growing up within the average Australian family was for me an exercise in gradual disempowerment, whereas growing up with a lesbian feminist mother has been about knowing and owning my power without ever having to take pains to claim it.
And initially we started Lesbian Litter Going, which is a group for lesbians who want to have children. And initially when we started that group we thought that could be for the women who hadn't had children yet and women who had already had their children. We thought it could all be mixed in together, and I mean it didn't take long to realise that didn't work. So lesbian parents, the feminist lesbian parents group came out of Lesbian Litters.
Yes, so we decided that there was a need for something else other than a Sunday monthly meeting, and we came up with the idea of a conference. And at first we were going to hold it in a small venue. We were thinking we'd get maybe 30 women.
It's just astounding how many women are here, and there's all these women that I know, and it's like, oh right, oh you've got grown-up kids, right? Oh yeah, oh you're thinking about having a kid, oh you foster, and I mean there's heaps and heaps and heaps of us around.
And then as the registrations came pouring in, we realised we'd need a much bigger space, and I thought, oh no, we're going to have 50 women, and my partner said to me, you're going to have 100, and I just didn't believe it.
Yeah, it's been an exciting day because we didn't expect so many people here, and the fact that we've got something like 130 women and we expected 30 is quite incredible.
So there's obviously a real need for the conference. About half the women are parents already, and the other half are planning to have a baby, whether that be very soon or at some stage in their life.
And this conference actually came about when we were looking for ways to get more women involved and to stay. You know, we had a few women who'd come along and they'd go again. Yeah, so that's how this actually came about, and God knows, by the looks of this conference, we should get a few more along to the group.
And there's a lot of workshops going, and there's almost 40 children registered in childcare. And the children have got workshops to attend. They're right now they're in circus skills. 2 women from the Women's Circus have come along to teach the children some circus skills. And we've had a panel of young people who have been brought up by lesbian mothers who came and spoke, and people from the audience asked them questions as well, and that got a terrific response.
Some of what I have to say may not be relevant to lesbians who have or are going to have children outside of the patriarchal structure. At the same time, I hope that by expressing my experience, I'll give some insight as to the difference between living in such polarised environments, as well as reinforcing the fact that lesbian parenting has the potential to be much healthier than the alternative, just in case anyone was wondering.
The morning workshops are planning to have a baby, and we've also got how children affect their relationships.
I know from my experience that children in a relationship change a lot of things, and there's a lot, you have to work a lot harder on the relationship with children.
There's one more in the morning. Schools, children and homophobia, and that filled up so quickly.
The workshop was great I think what it really gave me was the fact that, we're all kind of experiencing the same thing in various ways, and the whole concept of teasing and children being teased is, was one of the main things that we talked about.
How do I deal with it when my kid comes home from school saying, everybody hates me because my mum's a leso, or, that kind of stuff?
I've always thought that teachers and principals just accept, and parents just accept that teasing is a normal way of life, and this is something that children have to get used to, and something, that I've really rejected. And, really schools don't feel that way, and schools are trying to change the way that children treat each other and are treated. And, you know, that seems to me like a bottom line of how some things can change in terms of homophobia.
And this year I'm going to be in grade 2, and I'm going back to school on Tuesday.
What do you think your teachers at your school, what do you think their attitude is towards lesbians? Would you feel worried to tell them about your mum because of how they might react?
No, because my mum's been on radio, and what's the difference? Because I've got lots of friends, 2 goldfish, a dog that's up in Sydney with my dad, and no, there's not really any difference.
Being the child of a lesbian also brings the opportunity of, to an extent, naturally redressing some of the world's inequities. For example, I've been able to accept heterosexuality and homosexuality as equally viable, as opposed to seeing them as the and the other. And in observing the way the world has frowned upon my mother, the lesbian, whom I love, I have from a young age been able to overcome the many myths of the dominant culture, thank the goddess, and create my own healthy perspective on life. Exploring the things I found difficult as a result of having a dyke mother wasn't so straightforward. For one thing, I found that a lot of the usual difficulties arose from the general alienation lesbians face from wider society. And looking at that society, I was generally more relieved than strained by not being accepted by it.
You know, we all struggle with this issue, and we all feel that it's horrible to see children suffering. And, you know, I guess one of the things that I saw in that workshop is the need to actually separate ourselves out from us feeling responsible for that pain. We're not responsible for that pain. You know, society is and how the kids are treated, and we need to support kids and, you know, say, yes, it's difficult, you know, how can we deal with it best? So, but, you know, certainly I got the sense that a lot of parents actually feel responsible for that homophobia, and, you know, it's not our responsibility.
I talk to my daughters openly and honestly. One of my daughters had quite a bit of issues with my lesbianism, but she seems to have now come to a place where she's accepting to a degree, but there is a balance there because she has a boyfriend who comes over, so we're working out, she's accepting my lesbianism, and, you know, I'm accepting the fact that she has a teenage boyfriend and all the thing that goes with that.
As we talk about families, you know, grandparents and cousins and aunties and their responses to you being a lesbian, and to your child and to your partner, and whether they're recognised or acknowledged.
At lunchtime we had a lesbian lawyer speaking to us about various legal aspects that relate to lesbian families and their children, and she talked a bit about what's happened with lesbian custody cases where women have had children in a marriage and have then split up with their husbands and tried to retain custody of the children. Things have really sort of lightened up quite a lot in recent years, and certainly being a lesbian is by no means grounds for not getting custody of your children.
I've got 5 children from a marriage, and Sally courageously has come to live with us and copes admirably most of the time.
Co-parent of 5 children is fairly interesting.
And a year ago she didn't know anything about children, and look at her
now I can change a poo in there.
Now she's cleaning off a cot that has been smeared with poo by a toddler who's being toilet trained, and all sorts of stuff.
And for me, I find that it's I find I'm often a buffer between the children and Sally, and vice versa between Sally and the children. So.
And for me it's hard because sometimes I'm feeling, you know, a little bit torn between my children's needs and the needs of my partner, and because she's not their biological parent, well, there are certain dilemmas with that.
You know, something that I feel isn't talked about very often is how, you know, how things go for the non-biological mother, and it's actually, I mean, it's been very difficult in that role, but now I feel quite comfortable with it. So I'd kind of like to share some of my experience so that other people mightn't have to go through the same pain.
I've played the role of co-parent before for 10 years in a relationship that finished about probably 3 years ago, and that was a very hard time for me. As much as I enjoyed co-parenting and I enjoyed playing the second mum to those 3 children, at the same time I felt I felt that I wasn't recognised in my role as co-parent.
Because I'm basically a part-time parent, I'm not the primary carer of my child, and so while this stuff's important, but it's not something that I think about absolutely all the time, but it's something that's there, and I have conversations with the other mother.
And I think as a non-biological mother that you feel like you have to prove a lot more about how close you are to a child, and that's something that I've struggled with along the way, and certainly tried to show that we were really close. And it didn't happen for quite a long time. It was very obvious that our daughter was closer to Viv, the biological mother, than she was to me.
The sexuality stuff is hard enough in the society we live in, and not being recognised as a lesbian, let alone not being recognised as a lesbian co-parent or parent. Like, why are we even called co-parent? Just because we're not the biological person, we're still in a sense of putting the outer by being called a co-parent. In the heterosexual relationship, they're the parents.
And now things have evened out, although it's certainly obvious to me that for emotional needs our daughter still depends more on Viv than on me. But it no longer bothers me. I don't feel like I have to prove anything to her, to Viv, to society, to anybody. I just feel that that's okay, that that's how it happens, and and we have a different relationship.
Legally, I'd like to, I think people need to know, and I think part of the conference today too is maybe a way of finding out what our rights are as parents, as lesbian parents or as lesbian co-parents. And here I feel like I'm just suffering alone, basically, through the fact that I now no longer have contact with these children from a 10-year relationship, and I don't really have anyone to talk to who has been there.
Well, in fact, co-parents don't actually have any rights because the law hasn't sort of caught up with that sort of an arrangement. So if the mother dies, for example, the co-parent doesn't automatically have a right to look after the child. Certainly, it would be considered. It's not that her rights would just not be considered at all. And if she'd been living with a child and had a close and warm relationship and if it wasn't contested, she could just carry on. But if it was contested, then she'd have a good case, but it wouldn't be set in concrete.
We had to put on 2 parallel workshops for co-parenting because they filled up really, really quickly, and women are disappointed because they couldn't get in. So there's about 44 women in those 2 workshops. There's single lesbian parenting, and there's coping with the failure to get pregnant. We've got 2, they've filled up as well. We've got 2 workshops running it simultaneously on feminist parenting.
When finally I moved back in with my mother, I was moved to joyous tears by the idea of moving also into the radical lesbian feminist world, a world that in a word felt safe. Consequently, my story of being the child of a lesbian runs the risk of sounding like a fairy tale, which I really don't mind, as I don't think we have enough of them.
We're a feminist group, so we talk all the time about raising boy children, raising girl children.
And I suppose it's about, if we're feminists, we as parents, we want to kind of do it a bit differently and, do our little bit for making the world a bit better. And, so it's like, how do we go about doing it?
I think it's important to point out that my mother's feminism has actually had an impact upon the way I experience my relationship with her and to the sort of family we've created together. And so when I speak of my lesbian mother Evelyn today, I inherently acknowledge her feminism.
It was a bit of one of the issues, like about being a feminist parent and how do you deal with it. And interestingly enough, a lot of what we're talking about was boy children. And at one moment I had this flash of, God, here we are, the boys are taking over again. But I mean, it is the things. There seem to be so many boy children with lesbians, but there's things, violence, issues of violence, particularly about, you know, how do you respond if your kid's being violent, and there was sort of, you know, because violence isn't necessarily totally a male prerogative.
One thing I didn't take too kindly to were lesbians who thought children were adults in undeveloped bodies. I think there's plenty of room to acknowledge a child's inherent uniqueness and intelligence without expecting them to be constantly composed and rational.
We knew when Sally was really accepted was the day Alice, who was 10 at the time, shrieked, "I hate you!"
Oh, she loves me.
I think the occasional denial of the validity of adolescent behaviour has something to do with some feminists connecting more with the politics of child rearing as opposed to the personals of child rearing. And if there's one certainty about adolescence, it's that it's quite spontaneous and unpredictable.
The effect of the coming out had on my children was quite great now I look back on it, but I was too busy in my own process trying to come to terms with the fact that, oh my God, I'm a lesbian, and dealing with all of the homophobic sort of socialisation that I had encountered when I was growing up. So I was dealing with my own homophobia of myself. So that was really hard.
My biggest gripe about being brought up by a lesbian feminist is that I feel for all the work that's done advocating the well-being of straight women, there's a tendency to forget that even the empowered need support sometimes. Again, I'm not saying that Ed neglected me in any way. What I do feel is that some of the women who knew me as Ed's daughter assumed that because I was growing up in an empowering environment, I was naturally transforming into an Amazon free of deep pain and free of oppression. The reality is that no matter what sort of home you live in, the big world is out there, and it tends to be not very nice to most of us. There were times I would have liked to be able to crumble without feeling like an anomaly.
You know, a lot of what we were talking about, I think, matches what the children who started the day were talking about, that it's really important that children themselves have the skills and have the confidence to be able to deal with issues that arise in their lives, and the fact that their, you know, mothers are lesbians is one of the things that, you know, they will have to deal with.
Mum was very open and communicative, and she sat us down very early on and said, "Listen, boys, there's something we have to talk about." And, you know, she was very, very straightforward about it. It wasn't a big build-up or anything. It was just basically, well, you know, I'm a lesbian. Do you know what that means? Because we were pretty young. and so she sort of elaborated a bit, and we said, oh, yeah, okay. There was just nothing really. There was no issue. And that was what it was like. That was all there was to it. I think every other guy, and certainly a lot of girls that I know, would have benefited from my mother. Like, I think
the way that we've dealt with it with our daughter is that we tell her that she's special to have two mothers, and you know, promote a feeling of actually being, you know, that being something good, rather than it just being, you know, no different, because that's simply not true to me, that it's no different. And so we've tried to engender a feeling of positiveness in her.
There's a lot of things that I wish I'd done different, but you can only say that in retrospect, really. I wish that I had been more attentive of how things were affecting them, and being more thoughtful of my process of how it affects them, because first and foremost I'm a mother, then I'm a lesbian, and I mean, I think that will always be, because I'll always be a mother and I'll always be a lesbian.
It's a very good thing to see all kinds of women here who are parents. I've been to a couple of meetings of lesbian parents groups, 2 different groups, and I found them not all that sort of interesting for myself. A lot of women there are quite a lot of women with very different interests. Just because we're lesbian parents doesn't mean we have much in common, except of course that we are parents, and because we're lesbians, you know, we're sort of isolated because of that. But today there's so many women here from diverse backgrounds. That's good to see that that's happening. and that we're represented in the community. There's quite a wide variety of women out there with children who are gay. So, there we go. Is that good? Okay. If you're bringing up children, especially when they're very young, it's a lot of hard work.
We're lucky in that they're the children of a marriage, so that they go away for weekends, and we do get some time to ourselves because nurturing the relationship could be very difficult otherwise with this many children. Mainly we muddle through, and we all survive, and we're relatively insane.
The workshop that I've just facilitated is the workshop on single lesbian parenting, and we had about 10% of the conference was there. I think it was a really rewarding time because I think as a single lesbian parent, many of us had the common issues of that we felt very isolated, that we often feel like we're the only one. Even coming to this conference, it seems like most lesbians are in relationships, I guess like most people in the world.
With this conference, a number of women who rang were saying to me, like, you know, I'm just so isolated, I don't know any other lesbians, and, you know, when they'd hear there were 100 women going to be here, God, are there really? I had no idea there were that many bloody lesbians with children.
And I think all of us have found that we feel invisible as lesbians because once you become a lesbian parent, especially if you've got long hair, people just assume that you're heterosexual. And it was great to meet women from all over Melbourne who have that common bond. And I think in a workshop like this, I think the beauty is just to meet other women, to make that contact with other women, so that next time you see their faces, you know you're not alone and there's another sister out there in exactly the same position as you.
Something obviously that's happening today too. Hopefully women are meeting other women, and even if they don't follow anything up from this conference, I mean, at least they will go away with that sense of I'm not alone and there will be another conference.
It was a day we started off thinking, oh, all right, what's going to happen here? But I think that, yeah, the bonds that have been made over the day, the links, I should say, that have been made over the day are ones that I hope will carry on, and from now on we will meet each other in future and actually know that there's another lesbian mother. It's a great feeling.
Okay, so what we might do now is we might have maybe 5 more games of this. Now, I'm notoriously bad at keeping count, okay? So, Mr. Huey, can you try, with some help of Mr. Nick over here, we're only allowed to have 5 more turns of this, okay? You have to tell me when that's up, because sometimes I get a bit excited and forget. Okay, so are we ready? Are we milling a bit and okay, we might have another shake. Are you ready to shake? But you have to stop really, really still. Okay? Ready to shake?